And he's the best person to be with you when you're scared or upset about something. On screen, they smiled. They fixed broken family treasures. It made families cry every time they fixed something. The repair shop loved Suzie and Steve Fletcher, but they kept a secret from many years ago. People watched and praised their skill, but few thought about the silent battles they fought outside the barn doors. Fans are shocked that Suzie and Steve Fletcher's repair shops are finally open. Their story hasn't been told before, but we're about to. A journey through the pain of youth, the silence of a lifetime, and the choice to finally let it all out. The piece before the show. Millions of people around the world found comfort in the slow beat of the repair shop for more than 10 years. The soft scrape of sandpaper against worn-out wood, the reassuring tick of a newly serviced clock, and the sad tears of families who had lost family heirlooms came together to make a place of warmth and custom. It was easy to feel at ease around Suzie and Steve Fletcher, who were siblings whose hands seemed to have a special kind of magic on them. Suzie was patient and caring, and it showed in the way she touched people and how calm she was. Steve, who was careful and quiet, kept her energy in check with a steady calm. All of them worked together to keep the workshop going. They were like anchors in a sea of memories and repairs. The people saw them as more than just skilled craftsmen. They were family, and they stood for power, loyalty, and the deep roots of heritage. The way they laughed together, looked at each other subtly, and praised each other's good points. It was a dance of family, and the rhythm was almost perfect. But there was a story tucked away behind those warm smiles and soft hands. A story with pain, strength, and secrets that were kept from the cameras. A fact that isn't shown by the old walls of the workshop or by the shine of polished silver. The fans could feel something going on below the surface. Suzie's eyes lit up with sadness when a piece made her think of times she had lost. There was a short pause in Steve's steady hand when the subject got too personal. These little details hinted at a secret part of the story. But no one knew how far the shadows went. There are shadows under the workshop. There was more to Suzie Fletcher's life than the pretty face she had on TV. Behind her calm smile was a history marked by quiet strength. Suzie learned what it means to work hard, be responsible, and make quiet sacrifices while growing up on one of Colorado's vast ranchlands. She was shaped by the vast, wild, and sometimes cruel environment. She thought her marriage would bring her happiness, but it turned out to be hard. She felt terrible when she thought about the man she loved, and she rarely told anyone, not even near her. A relationship that was harmed by fear, bruises that were covered by everyday life, and times when fear took the place of love. Suzie's determination never wavered, no matter how much she had to carry. Her pain gave her strength, which she put into every piece she fixed up and story she helped keep alive. But there were scars below the surface. Invisible to the crowd but very well known to her. Steve Fletcher, her brother and co-star, kept their past safe in a quiet way. He was crazy about the complicated gears and soft springs in old clocks and watches. The accuracy he sought in life showed in the way he worked. But behind the steady ticking of the clocks was a man covering up his own mental wounds. Steve was acting cool, but he wasn't. He was responsible for keeping his sister safe, calming down the family, and making sure the workshop stayed a safe place for both of them. His calm hands did more than just fix things. They fixed broken hearts, including his own. Together, Suzie and Steve showed the world that they were one. Their friendship, which was sometimes light-hearted and sometimes serious, grew out of our need to stay alive. Through their interactions and talks, fans thought they got a glimpse of the whole picture, but they hadn't even begun to scratch the surface. There was a story below that would soon come to light. It would contradict the reassuring story and show how strong the Fletcher brothers really are. The house that tried to get better. Their home in Oxfordshire as kids was full of different things. At first glance, it looked like a broken-down, old house. The wooden floors creaked and the wallpaper was faded, making you think of stories from generations ago. It was full of noise, chaos, and laughter from 4 kids chasing each other through the narrow hallways. Their hands were always making something or fixing something. It was a place where family meals, homemade cakes for birthdays, and the smell of freshly brewed tea from the kitchen filled the air. From the outside, it looked like a picture of a loving, close-knit family. But there was pain and weakness that couldn't be spoken above the noise and laughs. Their mother struggled in silence with severe postpartum depression, which was not well known at the time and was often ignored or kept secret. There was a persistent darkness over the house that was hidden by the happy noises of youth. Their mom's life was often filled with deep sadness and worry. Her strength was leaving her like a tide going out to sea. Their father, who was supposed to keep the family together, couldn't handle the stress. The man he was shaped by his own worries and anger. Someone who tried to be the rock but was actually breaking down inside. The growing stress finally got to him, and he had a nervous breakdown, the kind that breaks down walls and shows how weak you really are. There were times when the kids were quietly taken to cousins' houses, where they could be safe from the storm and keep their innocence. Days were spent figuring out how to live with a family where the friendliness sometimes felt like a carefully kept mask, a thin layer that hid the emotional cracks below. Later, Steve Fletcher thought back on those early years with both anger and kindness. Postpartum depression was terrible for our mom, he remembered, his voice heavy with memory. It wasn't just sadness, it was a deep sense of being alone that pushed Dad over the edge. He couldn't handle it and had a nervous breakdown. As Suzie spoke, her voice was filled with sympathy as she said, "Looking back, I feel so sorry for Mom." Nobody really understood how terrible it was at the time. The treatment they gave her was at best crude and at worst barbaric. She was stuck in a system that didn't know how to help her. Even though things were hard, the brothers' memories of their parents are balanced, with loving and honest memories. "Like most families, we had problems," Steve said in a quiet voice. "We had each other, though. We made it through those times. It didn't make us who we are or hold us back like you might think. It wasn't just luck that they were strong. In a quiet way, it showed that the family was strong and ready to heal in its own way." The years that were not there. Suzie did something that would change the course of her life when she turned 30. She left Oxfordshire's rolling fields and well-known streets and went across the Atlantic to start a new life in Colorado, USA. From the outside, it looked like a big risk, an exciting journey, and a chance to start over, far from the shadows of a hard past. But there was an element of flight hidden beneath the promise of fresh starts. Moving was about more than just getting away from old ghosts. It was also about taking advantage of new chances. The vast landscapes and clear skies of Colorado gave Suzie room to breathe and a break from the hidden problems she was having as a child. At least that's what it seemed like at first. She found love in America. Rob, the man she married, moved into the story but didn't say anything. For her many fans who watched her on the repair shop, he stayed a mystery, an empty spot on the screen that said a lot. The marriage was never talked about in public. Behind closed doors, there was a chapter of pain and endurance. It was a secret battle that made Suzie the strong, caring woman that people would come to respect. She went through a lot of pain in that relationship. But what really made her a hero was her quiet strength and refusal to let pain define her. Even though she rarely talked about them, those years changed her view of the world, made her more empathetic, and made her more determined to help people heal through the skill and connections she made on the show. Her journey from those hard years of being hidden to a public life and artistic fulfillment is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It shows that even in the darkest times, hope and change are still possible. What about her brother in the UK? The quiet was planned. Steve Fletcher's life mostly took place in the quiet county of Oxfordshire, away from the constant attention of the public. The horologist's happy face at the repair shop was seen by everyone, but few knew the heavy load he carried inside. Steve was very careful, and not just with his clocks and watches. He was also very careful about the lines he drew around his personal life. Steve raised 5 kids in a close-knit family and worked hard to build a reputation as a master craftsman who could fix even the most broken family treasures. Even with all of this success, the family stayed together because of an unspoken understanding. A deal that was made in secret. Behind every laugh caught on camera was a carefully built wall that kept the family from facing the harsh truth that could have broken up their world. This deal was unwritten between Suzie Fletcher and the other women. Suzie Fletcher was known for both her leather work and saddle restoration. She may have known more than anyone else how much it costs to be seen. "We had to hide this," she said quietly in a rare interview. "Because people didn't share. Not back then. It was risky to talk about these things. There was a reason for that silence. I had to stay alive." In a time when talking about mental health was frowned upon and being open and vulnerable was often seen as sign of weakness, the Fletchers built their fortress not with bricks and mortar but with silence and care. Suzie's words echoed the fact that many families of that time didn't want to say. To protect not only the people but also the family as a whole, grief and trauma were locked away and out of sight. Steve's decision not to move or change direction and leave Oxfordshire in order to get away from the memories of past hardships was a quiet sign of his strength. He was strong because he didn't run away from pain, but instead learned how to handle it without breaking. The cameras could never catch the hours of quiet fight that went on behind the workshop doors. There were times when the hands that fixed old clocks shook with memories that should not have been shared. People's smiles didn't show how sad they were that night, or how hard it was to protect a family tradition that had been scarred by loss. So, in the quiet time between clock strikes, Steve and Suzie's silence said a lot. It was a language that was learned and spoken through knowing looks and nods. It was a tie that could not be broken, made in the depths of pain and love. The surface has cracks in it. But time, like even the most perfectly tuned machines, shows flaws. Steve and Suzie worked hard to keep up a calm and happy front, but there were small cracks that only people who paid close attention could see. Fans missed Suze in a few episodes of The Repair Shop, and they didn't forget about it. There were more and more whispers of worry, but no one said what they were worried about. Her presence, which used to be lively and bright, seemed less strong, like ghosts from the past were slowly coming into the present. Steve also became more quiet. Interviews took on a more reflective tone. The man who seemed unbreakable at first showed brief hints of a deeper story. On podcasts and behind-the-scenes shows, emotions that had been buried for a long time came to the surface. Pieces of stories were told, and the words used were carefully picked to make you think more than they answered. Fans were drawn to Fletcher's work because it was real and friendly, but they couldn't figure out what was behind those smiles. The family's silence became less of a hurdle and more of a plea for understanding, patience, and respect for the fights that were being fought behind closed doors. What had they been through to get this close? What tragedies and struggles had brought them together so closely? What facts did they know they were hiding behind a curtain of strength and grace? People were interested and also felt sorry for them as the cracks in their public image got bigger. No longer was the Fletcher family's story just one of fixing things up and making things. It was a story about people who had to fight to stay alive, keep going, and be brave enough to protect each other in the worst times. As the public's attention grew, so did the excitement. What was lost or hidden would not be the only thing that would be shown when the time came. It would be about how strong you can be when you let yourself be weak and how brave you have to be to finally say what you never dared to whisper. The choice to talk. There was no surprise here. Over the course of decades, there was a lot of internal debate that finally came to a head. Steve and Suzie carried their shared past with a quiet dignity and strength for years, but the storm that was always there was rarely shown. People looked up to them and admired them their whole lives, especially at the repair shop. Behind the scenes, though, a thin wall of silence stood firm, not out of shame, but because it had to. The world saw their smiles, how comfortable they were with cameras, and how much they loved restoring things. But they knew there was more to the story than that. Pain isn't always easy to see. It can hide behind calm eyes and soft words at times. Then there was the moment when the scales finally fell. It wasn't a big news story or a tabloid reveal. It was an in-depth, honest, and deeply human podcast conversation. A few carefully chosen words were sent into the ether. At first, they seemed hesitant, like they were trying the water. The response happened right away, but it was clear what was meant. They were no longer hidden. Steve was the first to speak. His voice was steady, but heavy with the weight of holding on to the past for years. He said it in a quiet voice, not angry, because when you grow up with that kind of setting, you just carry it with you. But you have to let some of it go at some point. You can't keep carrying everything inside for a long time. It hurts you. It wasn't an attempt to get sympathy or respect. It was freeing and a wake-up call. The siblings had decided to be seen over being hidden. Something big was going on behind their quiet. A quiet but powerful movement toward healing, finding the truth, and taking back who you are. The secret part. Still, even with that big step forward, there was still a lot of darkness. They only scratched the surface of a much darker story that had been hidden for a long time under the smiles and the craftsman's patience. Suzie and Steve talked about the parts of their past that they had been keeping secret out of fear and fierce loyalty in a long conversation. This wasn't just a sad or hard story. This was life in its most raw, unfiltered form. The world had only caught glimpses of Suzie's marriage, but it had been a very hard road. The man she married, Rob, had fought pancreatic cancer with the spirit of a fighter. But the sickness did more than just make people sick. It showed an incredibly scary change in character. What started out as small changes turned into clear signs of violence and control. She said that the worst memory she had was being pulled off the ground by her throat while her feet dangled and her body quickly lost its breath. Suzie said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I really thought I was going to die. He was squeezing me so hard I thought my airway would close off completely. I don't know what stopped him or why he let go, but when he did, I gasped and was scared." The weight of her admission hung in the air, and her silence spoke louder than words. Not just for the crowd, but also for Suzie, it broke her illusions. "I was deeply shocked," she said, her eyes wide. That kind of violence and fear was for other people and other stories, not mine. He would never hurt me, I told myself until I saw the truth. Until I felt his hands on my throat. The cruel turn of events that turned Rob from a loving partner into someone unreliable and dangerous made Suzie's pain even worse. Even though she was in pain, her words were filled with strength and an unsaid promise to take back her life. This secret part was the hardest to talk about. But they had to do it because they now knew that silence was a form of slavery. It was free to speak. What the fans didn't know. People all over the world have watched Suzie and Steve Fletcher do their magic for years. The cameras caught the careful attention and the gentle hands that brought history to life. They saw the smooth leather, the shiny metal, and the fine stitching. But what they missed was the quiet strength that was there. The people who fixed up the things were what the story was really about. Under the surface, Suzie and Steve were alive in every way. They had scars on their bodies that no one could see from hard times they had as kids, years of silence and pain that was never spoken. The laughs over a fixed clock face covered up the fact that they had been up all night fighting memories that wouldn't go away. The careful, patient work that went into fixing old seats reminded them of the hard work they had to do on their own broken pasts. Each family heirloom or old thing wasn't just a job. It was a sign, a reflection of their own paths. When something was broken, they knew how heavy it was and how much hope it held. For them, repair was more than just skill. It turned into a language that helped people heal, a quiet but strong way to take back control of things that felt lost. In a rare moment of weakness, Steve once said, "We didn't just fix things for other people. We were able to heal by restoring these gems piece by piece. We found pieces of ourselves along the way." Suzie, whose gentle personality belied a life of hardship, agreed. "It wasn't just the leather that I stitched together. It was about getting back together and telling a story I wasn't ready to say out loud." The show's popularity made them look like great restorers, but it never really showed how hard their personal fights were. They had to hide their pain and problems behind smiles and professionalism, even though the weight of their pasts was threatening to crush them. In public, they had to put on a show all the time, which often felt like it went against their own values. But through it all, their strong bond as siblings was what kept them alive. It was in late-night talks, quiet understanding, and the promise to keep going even though bad things happened in the past. They weren't just fixing old things when they were together. They were fixing themselves in silence. It made a huge difference when Suzie and Steve Fletcher finally let everyone into their private life. People who had only seen the skilled hands and calm voices behind the repair benches got a sudden glimpse of the real, unfiltered people who worked there. They talked about how they had been abused as kids. Shadows of mental health fights they fought in silence, even when they were in the public eye, that went on for much longer than anyone could have imagined. Because of pain passed down from generation to generation that wrapped around them like a suffocating cloak. And making threats to die again. But even though it was dark, they chose to be kind. They chose to keep repairing not only things but also a sense of hope and strength. Their work became a lighthouse, showing that it is possible to heal after pain and rebuild things that seemed hopeless at first. The most important thing was Suzie's realization. A truth that was kept hidden for decades was finally told in an honest way. It wasn't just a story about getting by. It was an invitation to be brave, to speak out, and to see flaws as strengths. This wasn't just another episode of a well-known show. It was a reckoning, a moment when the truth beneath the shiny new repair came through. Weak, beautiful, and definitely human. They weren't just keeping history alive for other people for the first time. They were taking back the story they had told. Piece by piece, stitch by stitch, they rebuilt their identities along with the family heirlooms they took such good care of. And by doing that, Suzie and Steve Fletcher taught their listeners a lesson they will never forget. That healing can be a way to make something new. And that sometimes fixing ourselves is the best way to fix things. What is a lie you've been telling for too long? What would it take to let it out for good? Drop your ideas in the box below. Thanks for watching this movie with us. See you next time.